Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Big Mark. Today, the topic is water.
People say water. Water? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Well, water, like everything else in your body, really controls the temperature and allows the all your bodily functions to function. It's just almost the same thing with cooking. It's the medium. It's part of everything. Without water, we can't exist. We'd all be dead. So it's a very important part. And strangely enough, most of the vegetables that we have are almost everything are made up of water. I have a hard time wrapping my mind around potatoes and carrots being 84% water. But physically, I can't picture that. But the other things, you go on mushrooms, spinach are like 93%. But I know when shredding potatoes to make potato pancakes, I usually use a ricer to get water out. And it's amazing how much water is in there. So it comes down to it's a very, very, very vital part of our life and the way we cook. The four ways that the water comes in is either boiling, blanching, poaching, and steaming. And so we would talk about those sorts of things. Boiling stuff, it's to soften them, to break down, to leach the flavors out. And make something that's hard, soft, and easy to eat. And easy to eat. Steaming really occurred mostly in Asia, and I believe most of it came about because they didn't have stoves like we have. Might have one source of heat, like a fire or some sort of a rigged up fire in China back in the olden days. And so what they do is put one thing in, they put water in the bottom, boil it, then they'd layer up all these little baskets of things and steam. They'd be airtight going up with a cover. And Indian cooking is the same thing in many cases. And steam goes up and does. Of course, it's a great way to cook because all the flavors stay within the meat. You're not, leaching it out, in water. Then you come to blanching. Blanching is usually done for two reasons. Number one, you get vegetables that you're going to use on another, like a stir fry. It could be like broccoli or beans or some other hard vegetables that need a little power cooking beforehand. So you blanch those. The other part of that is what you're doing is sealing in the color. You blanch them for a minute and a half, 2 or 3 minutes, then douse them right into cold water with ice, and that sort of sets the color. If you're using it again for a sauce or something else, maintains nice fresh looking and stuff. Then of course, the poaching is, you think of that with being eggs all the time. When you do it with fish, people poach fish. Chicken's probably the biggest thing that you're poaching. It's not that long and there's not that much flavor in chicken that's going to come out. But you would never poach, steaks or that kind of things that way. Those we braise in liquid. For long.
What's the essential distinction between boiling and poaching?
The boiling is just what it says, boiling water. It's at a rolling boil. You can see the bubble going in, and that's the heat, the circulation. It has the most intense heat. Poaching is just sort of like a simmer, and the stuff just sits in there and sort of heats through, slowly, so it stays tender and it doesn't, get toughened up by having all the juice go out of it. It just sort of warms it up slowly. Very similar to what I'm going to talk about at the end. Is another reason with that as well. But that's what poaching does. So then those are the main the main things. Then you talk about the pots being covered or not. Well, you're going to boil and stew something, you want the cover on it. If you're going to braise something, at some point you want to leave the cover off because the evaporation will come out and the steam disappears, the liquid goes down, and of course the flavor gets intensified, which is what you want, when that goes. And so that's used to cover that way. The other thing people say, do you rinse pasta or something off? Well, if you're going to use it in any kind of a cold prep like salads or anything else, you do rinse it off because you don't need the starch in there. You might add a little oil in some cases. It's going to sit around for a while. But what you don't want is it clumps together if it's not rinsed. However, if it's going into a sauce like linguine with clams or any marinara sauces, you want that starch in there because it helps you develop a little viscosity and also thicken it. And of course, the old wheeze about keeping a half to a cup of pasta water to the side is just for that reason, because you might want to loosen up or thicken, later on, with the preparation. Then and I think it's another way to do the pasta water. Some people say is to take, for example, if you're going to use broccoli ziti type of thing or beans, is to cook the broccoli and the beans in the water before you put the pasta in, and you get a double thing. And that comes down to seasoning water. And whether you all remember Emeril Lagasse, but this one thing was, where I come from, my water ain't seasoned. And meaning you have to season, which we do for, of course, with pasta, or some tablespoon of salt for every gallon of water. But you can season the water ahead of time with onion powder, any kind of, any kind of aromatic that you get, herbs. As long as it adds to the flavor, which it'll do. And then, of course, you put the pasta in, and that gets flavored with it as well. So those are just all just different things, ways of talking about the cooking process and how water is involved. However, and then roasting is another thing you can do when you're roasting vegetables, for example. You put a little bit of water in the bottom, and then you cover it, and the water will evaporate. And that also applies to cooking of sausages. And I even tried with bacon the other day, and the bacon gets steamed through, release the fat a little bit, and the water disappears. And get your browning and your caramelization. So water is a factor to understand how to use it. However, I think the newest thing is going to be affecting people in the future is what they call sous vide. And that's a French term, sous meaning under and vide meaning vacuum. You've all heard of sous chef, so that means the chef under the guy above, under chef. So sous vide is it's a temperature controlled water bath, basically. And you have the setup to really do it properly has a circulator, that keeps the water circulating. But the idea is to cook at a constant temperature, and it's some wonderful things that you can do with it. People talk about, I said, well, you wouldn't cook meat in water. Well, this is one thing where you would cook steaks. People can't believe it, but they cook steaks this way. It's in plastic bags, it's sealed, you season the steak, and you put it in at the controlled temperature, and you cook the perfect doneness you want. Rare, medium rare, and at that point, you take it out. At that point, you can freeze it, or you just hold it until later on when you want to reconstitute it. Now, is that browned? No, but that's what you do. You take it out of the bag, you take a pan just prior to serving it, a little butter, a little olive oil, and you high heat, and you saute it in that pan and build up your brown, put a little heat through it, and you get the perfect steak. So if somebody wants to, serve steak to friends, that's the way to do it. And it's just easier. It's all done ahead of time. But anything with a sauce, like marinara sauces, scallopinis, marcellas, any of those preps are perfectly done in the bags. Keep their taste and everything consistent, and then you just seal it. And again, when you need it, you come out. It's been done in restaurants, but I can see in the future that people like Stouffer's and all these other people who do these prepared meals, we putting these things out. And a housewife come home, or a housewife or a working mother, probably more the bet, comes home, and one kid wants marsala, the other kid wants linguine with something. He takes 3 or 4 bags out, gets a water bath going, puts them in. It's like operating a restaurant. Each one can have his own choice of what they want to eat. And you're not doing one common pot. It just makes it easier, more convenient. And I think that's going to be what's going to happen. Sort of the wave of the future. So like everything else, time will tell. But I think sous vide is going to be, I think, a big deal in the future. So that's my spin on water, and I guess that's where we go from there. So what are you going to talk about, Mark?
Well, I think, earlier in the week we were discussing what beverage to pair with water cuisine. And of course, the most logical is water itself. And I thought the idea was a little silly, but I started thinking about the role that water plays in bourbon production, that the quality of the water plays in sake production. And I thought, okay, this is actually something serious
Absolutely.
and interesting. Coincidentally, today is the 31st anniversary of the Berkeley Springs water tasting in West Virginia, which is the longest running water competition in the world. And they do distilled water, they do spring water, they do carbonated water, and tap water, which is interesting. There was one municipality that started bottling their tap water after they took high honors at this. So we're going to taste some waters. I'm going to start out with the Brita filtered Chicago water, and the alkalinity on our water here in Chicago is kind of goes between maybe 6.5 and 8.5. So it can be somewhat alkaline. So I think this is probably fairly alkalized because it has some weight to it. And the aftertaste kind of tastes like city infrastructure, to be honest, but the actual taste is pretty good. One interesting thing I learned about water testing is they test for cyanide, and there is an acceptable amount of cyanide you can have in your water without a problem, which is kind of nuts to me, but is the case. So our second water is Starkey's, and our next three waters are all from aquifer springs. So you're getting a lot of mineral concentration. Much like the Chicago tap water, this has a fairly rich mouthfeel. It feels kind of has a little bit of a lanolin quality, and that's because the alkalinity on this is about 9.2. So it has some weight to it. The next water we're going to try is the Mountain Valley Spring Water. When I first tasted this, I got a lot of salinity, but it actually is sodium free. All of your sort of flavor notes are coming from the magnesium, potassium, and calcium. And you get a lot of the calcium. You get a chalkiness almost like you would get from chalky soil if you're thinking about Chablis or Champagne. This feels much lighter in weight. It's about a 7.3 alkalinity. And the big deal with water in general are the total dissolved solids. That's all of your mineral components that the water might come in contact with from the earth, from rocks, and from old Chicago pipes. So this feels a little bit lighter. It's very refreshing, but you do get a really pretty strong but pleasing mineral aftertaste. And then we are finally going to do Aqua Panna. This is from Tuscany. This is produced on what was originally a hunting estate for the Medicis, which the Panna website describes as art patrons without mentioning any of the atrocities that family committed. But that's commerce, right?
Right.
Here's our Aqua Panna. Like the Spring Mountain Valley, it's a little bit lighter in body. It almost has a creaminess to it, which I find very pleasing. The alkalinity on this is about 8, so it's somewhere in the middle. So you do have some body. And it's very refreshing. Apparently, higher alkalinity has become a bit of a fad among fitness enthusiasts, which makes sense. I mean, acid in general, if it could break down a car, it's breaking you down. So That's a bit about water. The components actually do matter, and it makes sense when you think about mineral components in soil and its effect on wine. You, of course, the water is coming in direct contact with these minerals. They're going to impart, flavor and characteristic.
It reminded me years ago, the New York Magazine ran a tasting of about 8 or 9 waters in the tap water of New York. And they went through a very detailed, just like that's about the alkali and the mineral content, so on and so forth. And the one that ended up being the best of all of them was New York tap water.
That's astonishing.
That was a very interesting survey, I thought.
Yes, indeed.
Well,
So this has been another watered down episode of Cooking with Big Mark. If you have any interest in contributing to the Cooking with Big Mark cookbook project, which we're working on, forward me your email. I think at least in terms of family, we've brought in most of the seasoned cooks to collaborate. All right, thank you, Dad, and chin chin.
what are you going to do the rest of the day?
I know, right?
All right, bye-bye.